Good evening, everybody. We are just waiting for a few more minutes for more appointed members to join us before we officially start the JASCOM meeting.
All right.
All right, it looks like we are going to have a quorum. We're going to go ahead and get started. Chair Miller is still absent. In light of that, Commissioner Klaus, I know you are vice chair. We do have Councilmember Green in the room. Would you be amenable to her leading the meeting? Does the script in front of her?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking. And sorry, I wasn't aware that he wouldn't be here, or I would have been in person today. But yes, Councilmember Green would be great. That would be awesome. Thank you.
Sorry to Councilmember Green.
No, this is good. It's gonna be great. She's gonna kill it.
You are gonna kill it. I believe in you.
Good. So then I guess I get to call us to order at 5:33. Is that fair?
Yes.
Great. Gonna start with roll call. Chair Miller is absent. Vice Chair Klaus is online. Myself. Commissioner Agabi is online. Commissioners McGugan and Smith are here in person, and Commissioner Murphy is excused, absent. We're
Double checking to make sure he was sending someone else in his stead, but I do not see them yet, so.
okay. We'll say absent for the moment.
Correct.
Okay, first order of business is approval of the agenda and consent agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
Wonderful. Any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? I don't think that leaves anybody. Agenda, we have an agenda. Next up is public comment. I don't see anyone here. Is there anyone online for public comment?
No one registered to give comment online, nor was there any written comment received.
Okay.
And Chair, just to confirm, the motion was the approval of the agenda and the consent items. And so we do have a carried approval for the agenda and consent items.
That's exactly what happened.
Perfect.
Okay, now we are on to our business items. So it starts with Executive Director Hawk. Let's talk about shelter stats.
So the shelter statistics that we're going to go over this evening go through September 30th. We do not do year to date because we try to keep it some solid months. So it goes up until September 30th. Shelter intake, so we are still consistently up. August, we saw a record number of 400 animals come into the shelter. September, it did dip a little bit, but not by much. We are still seeing a large percentage of increase in intake. So shelter intake by animal, as you can see, we've had almost a 30% increase in cats this year. Dogs has slowed a little bit. We've dipped down to just below 16% increase for this year, but it's still incredible numbers of what we've got so far in 2025. And intake by jurisdiction. So intake by jurisdiction, we're still seeing Thurston County with the largest amount at 59%, followed by Olympia, then Lacey and Tumwater. We are sitting at a 39% increase in intake compared to last year.
Sarah, would you remind me how those percentages align with our percentages in the ILA?
So believe it or not, our animal intake and our field calls actually do fit probably within about 10% range of what our assessments are. So for example, the county pays roughly 50.1% in total assessments. And so it correlates pretty closely with intake. And I say within 10% because year over year, those numbers fluctuate a little bit. But the per capita, which is how we calculate our costs, are actually pretty comparative to services as well. Great question. For positive outcomes, we've seen 200 more adoptions over last year, increase in transfers, which is great. It can fluctuate any given year depending on capacity or space from other shelters. And return to animal, we had 301. Field calls have increased overall by just under 15%. And we're still seeing a current rise year over year. We peaked out in July of this year at 367. We've had a little slower and dips. And so the idea is if we're moving seasonally like we normally predict, now that it's getting colder, both field calls and animal intakes should decrease. The issue being that if you note in January, we were seeing close to summer numbers in what we would consider our slow months. And that's what has so severely impacted us this year, both from an intake, but a fiscal perspective. Field calls by jurisdiction. So Thurston County is at 44%. Olympia at 23, Lacey is also at 23, and Tumwater is at 10. Overall, Thurston County has seen an increase in field calls by about 20%. Tumwater is at 35% increase, Lacey at 14, and Olympia has only seen an increase of just under 2%. So Olympia is holding at about their same number for the most part. How was that?
Okay. Any questions or discussion on that item? Oh, yep. Commissioner Agabe, you have your hand raised.
Emily has her hand up before mine. Did she drop her hand?
Thank you. I dropped my hand. I was going to ask if the slides could be screen shared.
Oh, I thought I did share them. Oh, no, I did not. That was
That's
my
okay.
bad. Hold on, I am so sorry.
Why don't we take a quick run back through them?
Let me run through those. I did not share my screen when I did that.
Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Commissioner Klaus. So we'll go ahead and I'll do a quick run through again. And of course, all of these are also available in Civic Clerk. All the PowerPoints are uploaded. You guys can review them later, and I'm more than happy to send them out to you guys as well tomorrow. So that was shelter intake by animal, intake by jurisdiction, positive outcomes, field calls.
So one thing I did notice looking through this, and I think it is important to highlight, is, you know, you mentioned kind of the peaks of the high seasons and the lows of the low seasons, and how this is a little bit atypical, right? I think it's important to point out, though, that even within each of the months, though, you're pretty much seeing an increase in field calls across the board.
Correct. There's an overall increase regardless. It just the number of calls and animals that we are seeing are more comparative to our busy season numbers, but still an increase across the board. And we've had an increase in both intake and field calls for the last 3 consecutive years.
How does all this align with where you budgeted your staffing for the year, for this year?
So from a staffing point of view, we're definitely feeling those increased numbers. We have been at or over capacity all summer. And the staff are genuinely feeling that that busyness. More so, I would even say a little bit of burnout and some stress when it comes to that. We're trying to be very mindful of everybody's hours, making sure that people are taking the time off that they deserve, and making sure that people are not coming in sick, and so that they're taking their time off so that they can have a break. But it has definitely been impactful this year. I don't know if either one of you have any more to add in regards to that.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with everything you just said. In terms of budget for this year, we budgeted this year very similar to 2024 because 2024 saw such a large increase in dogs. It was a 30% increase in dogs in 2024 versus 2023 that we did not anticipate another 15 to 20% increase in dogs because that was just gigantic jump. And so going into this year, we were like, okay, it should be very similar to 2024, hopefully a little bit slower. And that was not the case. And so because we did not have a slowdown like we typically do, it is that leading to that burnout. So animal shelters typically don't start to ramp up until about April and then start to slow down in October. And we've just been 100 miles an hour the entire time. So we don't get to decompress. And then we don't get to work on things outside of just normal sheltering. So like those slow seasons is when we start looking at how do we improve or how do we do new programs. And we haven't been able to do any of that because it's just so much focus on like getting through the day to day.
Yeah, because otherwise we would normally have about 4 to 5 months of slow season where the team can regroup, work on some projects where, you know, maybe they felt like an SOP or a program like where they could tighten up stuff and like do things on the back end to help make things smoother. But that, we kept saying like, well, when it slows down, and it just, so far that slowdown hasn't come. And so there's been a lot of projects that have been sitting on the back burner this year.
So if you want me to hold this question until our next item, that's fine. But, you know, along the same vein, as you think about next year, is your expectation to staff for like a similar percentage increase intake wise, or?
So from a staffing perspective, we're still keeping the same amount of staff, but you will see that we did budget for increased costs across the board. So that's, you know, anywhere from a bit more overtime to increased supplies. And we'll go into more detail about that. But yes, it's a perfect question to have this entire night, honestly, because everything we talk about is going to connect.
I think a good example of that too, Sarah, is I think at the last JASCOM meeting, we came here and we asked for a increase in medical funding. And part of that was, you know, inflation that we've seen, but also part of it is the animal intake, correct?
Correct. And even in some ways, when you think about it, and I'm getting super technical, but it all plays it all affects everything, right? So like seeing that continued increase in dogs take longer in surgery. They take more resources to do in surgery, anything from oxygen to, you know, the drugs in order to have them under for surgery, like all of that costs more. It takes more time from the doctor as well. And so all of those are added costs. And then the other part that it affects us is the more dogs we have to do, the less other animals, because they take longer at surgery. And for example, you could probably do 2 to 3 cats for, you know, one large dog spay. So like all of that plays a part in affecting daily operations.
Hello, Chair. Our chair has arrived. I think I get to officially pass off this piece of paper now.
Yeah, somehow
Like, agree.
somehow convinced myself that I had the whole day off.
Oh,
Thanks.
man.
So, yeah, I got to almost.
So we're wrapping up business item A.
Okay,
these
so-
shelter stats.
Which order? We got A.
And I'll say Councilmember Green did a great job of serving as the chair for the last 16 minutes, so thank you.
Happy day of service.
Thank you. Do we have any representation from the county today?
Yes.
Commissioner Klaus is here.
Yeah, since Commissioner Klaus was online and she had not been given the script, we asked if she would be okay if Councilmember Green chaired since the script was here and everything, but the county is here.
Okay. And it looks like we only just have a couple business items left and it's
No, but they're big.
26 proposed budget.
I was
Yeah,
just gonna say, you talk like these are gonna be short.
and this time I'll remember to share my screen. Uh, All right. So now we'll get into it. This is the 2026 proposed budget. So in this presentation, we're going to cover key accomplishments of 2025, some significant trends, fund overview and budget summary for 2026, revenue and expenditures, and recommended actions for JASCOM. This slide is just up as a reminder that all of our decisions have been guided by the 5-year strategic plan. I will speak to it more as we go further, but one of the items to look at is our plan actually comes to a close in 2026. So we are looking at having a strategic planning session in 2026 so we can revisit our 5-year strategic plan and update it.
I have a question. So last time we did the strategic plan, was it with this body?
I don't believe there were any members present in 2021 of this current body that participated in the 2021 strategic planning session, except for staff.
Okay, but it is the Joint Animal Services Committee that,
Commission, yes,
commission that puts together the strategic plan, the 5-year plan.
correct. And they are the ones that approve the 5-year plan as well.
Okay.
And they're a part of the process from start to finish.
Is this something that we share with our councils and then come back with?
Yes, the last time the drafted strategic plan was shared out with the idea that any feedback would be brought back to the commission at one of the meetings so that staff could update the strategic plan accordingly.
Got it.
So accomplishments, this year focused a lot on goal 2 and 3 of our strategic plan. So key benchmarks were increasing save rates by 5 to 10% for vulnerable populations such as feral cats by 2023, establish baselines for behavioral outcomes. Our years have been slightly skewed as far as when we said that we would accomplish things. So we 37% of all of our cat intakes are now diverted through our community cat program. So that's an increase in life-saving and vulnerable populations such as feral cats and other cats that have no positive outcome with us at the shelter because they would be deemed unadoptable. We expanded our foster program and we created a new behavior enrichment volunteer program. We also, as part of Goal 2, we created the Animal Cruelty Response Team. It is the first of its kind in the nation, so kudos to Sierra and the team for creating that. We're getting a lot of really great feedback from some of the national organizations about our program and asking how we accomplished it. And I believe the team is submitting some proposals to perhaps speak at some of the conferences about this program next year. Continuing with Goal 2, expand and improve animal care programming. So key benchmarks were, we were very conservative, you guys. We said we would be performing 10% of all of our spay and neuter surgeries by 2022. As well as providing 15 to 20% of our medical treatment in-house by 2025. So this year we performed about 98% of all spay neuter surgeries in-house. And we performed over 90% of all medical treatments in-house. We may never get up to 100% because that also includes all of our forensic exams and any emergency after hours. So we don't necessarily include some of that in there, but as far as like regular treatment of animals in-house, we did most of that.
Is that typical for your animal services? I mean, like throughout the nation or even
think it
just our region?
I mean, I think it depends on the size, to be honest, and like what resources they have. So you could, for a smaller organization, maybe only have a part-time vet where some of their stuff is being done and they still have to contract with outside services. To some of the larger ones, having enough veterinary staff that everything and equipment, that everything can be performed in-house, including x-rays, you name it. We do not have the space, for example, to have an x-ray machine in our current facility.
I do want to point out, we were only able to accomplish those numbers because Dr. Swearingen has created partnerships with other veterinarians to come in and help do relief. Meaning Dr. Swearingen and the medical team we have is not sufficient enough to perform all of those on their own.
Right.
So we do bring in other veterinarians to help offset some of that, especially with the extreme increase in intake that we saw. So I wanted to just point that out.
Yeah, so, okay.
That was part of some of the increased medical costs that we saw that we requested because we actually had to go up to 3 surgery days this summer just to be able to keep up with the amount of animals coming in and making sure they were going out onto the adoption floor and moving out of the system. Goal 3, increase accessibility, inclusivity, and enhance community involvement. So staff completed their READY certification, making JAS a READY certified organization. So READY is racial equity, diversity, and inclusion, and it's specifically created through Care for Equity, which is an animal welfare organization that specifically designs programming like this tailored to animal welfare groups and animal shelters. So the team got a robust, the animal control officers had their own specific one, the vet team had their own specific one, and then the rest of the animal care workers, we had our own as well. So it was divided departmentally. You only need about 65% for care to consider you a READY organization, and we have 100% participation, including me. I finished. I was the one holding us back because I still was halfway through. So that is really exciting. And we also increased our participation and visibility this year with community events and other speaking engagements by over 30% over last year. Population served, so this is part of the factors that we take into consideration when creating the budget. It's only the 4 interlocal agreement partners that participate in the per capita assessment, and so we base it off of just those 4 jurisdictions' population numbers. We use OFM to determine what those estimated populations are. So again, we've had an increase in intake year over year. What I didn't mention in my shelter statistics, because I wanted to save it for this discussion, is that while we've had a 39% increase in intake year to date, we've actually already exceeded last year's numbers. So as of September 30th, we were at 3,322 animals that we have taken into the system versus last year, we had 3,305 animals, and that was through December. So basically, we still have 3 more months to go of intake. The good news is with increased intake also means increased positive outcomes. So we are seeing an increase across the board with adoptions at an all-time high of 1,500 thereabouts. And so we keep going up. Both community cats was at an all-time high. Will be at an all-time high this year. This was 2024 numbers. And so the numbers keep going up. Transfers, of course, like I said, fluctuate because it really depends on other shelters' capacities year over year. And what they take keeps getting a little bit stricter of what they're willing to accept into their shelters. Field response. So 2024, as you can see, we've consistently had an increase year over year in field response in all 4 jurisdictions. Last year Thurston County saw an increase of 23%. Tumwater only saw 7% last year. Lacey at 22% and Olympia was at 11% last year increase over the year prior. So our field calls continue to go up. We've also had several large-scale intakes and cruelty cases. If everybody remembers, we had that large-scale cockfighting case in February, which is a multi-jurisdictional event, case, day. I'm losing my words at the moment.
Multi-agency.
Multi-agency, thank you, see, so smart. We've had 5 cases of cruelty in the 1st degree just this summer, along with 2 instances of 2nd degree. And we are working with the Thurston County Prosecutor's Office on 11 cases that have been referred or filed. And that's just been, the new cases have just been this summer.
Mm-hmm.
Licenses, we saw a little dip this year. While they're still up, since we switched to online licensing, we did have a slight dip in our licensing this year. So not as many people are licensing. Could be for a variety of reasons. People forget. Most people don't realize that you have to license your pets. And I always look at licensing as it does have to be a multi-jurisdictional marketing. It cannot just be joint animal services talking about the need for licensing your pet, because licensing is one of those direct revenues that go directly to offset a jurisdiction's assessment. So the number of licenses a jurisdiction sells directly impacts a reduction in their assessment. So the more a jurisdiction can do to promote licensing, the more they can reduce their assessment overall.
Do we ask them to do that? Like, how do we say to the jurisdiction, hey, anything that any way you can promote licensing would be helpful, and they turn around and say, oh yeah, we'll put it on our website or our Facebook page or in our mailer or something along those lines?
We have encouraged our JASCOM representatives to take it back to their jurisdictions as a reminder and to broach how we can work together.
Shannon, have we ever put that in Lacey Life?
Yeah.
Yeah, City of Lacey actively posts and puts it out there.
Yeah, we typically will put it in Lacey Life, Lacey Weekly, online on our social media platforms, in addition to Lacey TV 77.
Nice.
Private contributions. So again, I just want to remind everybody that 2023, when we saw over $600,000 in donations, about half of that was from a bequest. So in 2024, the dip doesn't mean much if you actually take out the $300,000. We would have still had a fairly decent year. And so donations can fluctuate for a number of reasons. 2025 has been a very good year for Joint Animal Services. We received several bequests this year, including one that was over $1 million. And so to date, we have received over $1.9 million in donations this year. The majority of which were bequests. So again, the likelihood that we will see that amount in 2026, that is not, we don't budget for that amount in our budget.
So in these bequests, I know I'm talking a lot tonight. I think I'm trying to compensate for being late. In these bequests, is it like we have categories or is it like, hey, I'm gonna give you $750,000. I'd really like to see you put this towards spay or neuter or capital things at the facility, or how does that work?
It depends. It's honestly what the executor of the state, when they are executing the wishes from the bequest, sometimes the person who is bequesting us money does have restrictions put on it, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's just a gift for us to decide where
they
we
could
would like
say
to allocate it.
Everything except for German Shepherds, they can say that.
They could. I mean, it doesn't mean that, we might have a discussion with their executor about the spirit of what the person would like.
I think it's a really good question, Deputy Mayor, and that's one of the things that Animal Services has been working on too, which is donations, of making it a lot more effective for the giver and the organization to use the dollars. So Sarah, can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, so we've, by we, I really mean Andrew for the most part. We had a lot of restricted donations where it was very restrictive. And it, to the point where it was senior cat adoptions only. Dog care, like just some really random stuff, and some of it had been restricted funding that was given a long time ago. And so we worked really hard to spend down some of that restrictive funding, but also we allocated into 3 different buckets, technically 4. We have general services, general care. So our general bucket, we have vet care, and then we have basically animal care and supplies. The 4th bucket we did create for when it's time, is we do have a 4th capital bucket for money to be allocated to. So there's just 4 buckets now, and we really try to encourage everybody to put it in one of those. So 2026 budget assumptions. We took into consideration cost of living and step increases in salary, increases in insurance and liability, continued increase in animal intake, increase in field calls, specifically an increase in medical expenses for cruelty cases, and I'll talk about that when we get to the field budget. Increase in revenues through donations, expenses based on historical changes in actual costs, historical base for facilities and fleet maintenance, the new contract with Mason County for limited services, and the continued reserve use. Some budget assumptions that we looked into when creating the budget. So again, we have our strategic planning that will take place in 2026. We have allocated approximately $25,000 for the creation of our new strategic plan. We are planning to do 95% of medical treatments performed in-house next year, so a 5% increase. Again, this does not include our contract with Olympia Pet Emergency for animals brought to them by members of the community. That's a separate, we don't count those as part of our in-house. And it does not include any of the forensic specialists that we need for cruelty cases. And then our goal, fingers crossed, is to perform 100% of spay neuter surgeries in-house next year. Some other budget assumptions. So this year, we are recommending the continued use of reserves to offset for general purposes and for medical staff. So last year, we made the same recommendation for $135,000 from reserves to go to general purposes and $250,000 to go towards medical staff. We are making that same recommendation for a total of $385,000. However, as a reminder to everybody, this practice is not sustainable. And just to emphasize some of these breakdowns, about almost 89,000 of that comes from general services. We have 112,000 in shelter operations, maintenance, computer repairs, all of that. 64,000 for field equipment and depreciation, and then 219,000 for grants. So really what we're looking at, that I want to emphasize to JASCOM tonight, is we are using $870,000 of our reserves to help offset the true cost of service.
What percentage is that?
23-ish. It's just off the top of my head. We
Okay.
can do the math.
A little quarter, maybe almost a quarter.
So, if I'm jumping the gun, I'm jumping the gun, but, when I was reading my materials, so it looks like jurisdictional assessments are decreasing.
Correct.
While I appreciate that, can I ask why we didn't just leave them level and use slightly less reserves?
It was twofold. There was some tightening in other places, even though we did have some other expenses in others. So some of it genuinely is a fluctuation of our costs. Part of it also was to recognize that a lot of the jurisdictions are in a budget deficit this year, and we wanted to make sure that we were being cognizant of that going into building this budget.
For a lot of us, flat is a win.
And I think this body could, provide some direction to Sarah if that was something you wanted to consider to update, and what would likely be, one of the places where we've said we were going to reduce use of reserves was in the general purposes as well as the medical staff. Like Sarah mentioned, we're really repeating what we did last year, when last year we said we were actually gonna do a reduction this year. So that is an option that is available for this group.
So, I mean, just to put it in another point of view to look at, so that $1.9 million that we've had in donations, basically instead of us pulling from reserves this year, because this year we budgeted to pull a portion from our reserves, which was about the same amount as we're pulling this year. Basically, that 1.9 is going to go so that we don't have to pull out of our reserves this year. And then if there's any left over, it will go back to help pay for this year, this coming year.
And Peter Gabi has a question. I'll get to you just in a second, Peter. But we are going to have to level out. And I know we had the same conversation last year, right? We're like, okay, the true cost is gonna have to come out, the true cost is gonna have to be paid, the true cost is gonna have to be assessed, and we're gonna have to stop relying on reserves because, again, not sustainable, right? And so here we are, roughly 23, almost 25% of the reserves. Are you asking for action tonight?
We are not asking for any action tonight. The budget presentation is for you to take back to your councils, your commission, to talk about what the assessment is. And if you have any recommendations then for the November meeting, we can take those into consideration to have a final budget prepared for you in December to vote on.
Okay, and so if we did, let's say, reduce this down to 20% or 15%, and we saw those numbers reflected in the assessments. I know that we've had a little bit of a tough time these last few weeks with other entities and jurisdictions about how the funding and the ILA and all the fun things. But we really need to, in my opinion, start kind of curtailing the use of reserves. And really, I'd like to see how it affects the assessments, you know, even if we do the full 23%, right? We really need to take a look at, and you know, what's 20% gonna look like? What's 15% gonna look like? So that we can stop burning through cash that's gonna be needed in the near future, because we do have some capital things on the way. And I just kind of like to see how that's gonna look.
I do have a couple of just brief numbers for you towards the end of this presentation of what it would look like had we followed JASCOM's recommendation in the 2021 budget. Like following what we had said we were going to do, I have some recommendations of what that looks like.
Okay, all right, cool. Let's hear from Peter.
Thank you. So the $870,000 is, I thought I had 25% of our reserve
No, of our budget.
Yeah, I just did the
of
math.
our budget.
23.
So now the 870,000, what percentage of our reserve is that? Roughly
22.4.
2.4. So, okay. Can you back up to slide to the strategic session or planning that you showed on the slide a while ago?
This one?
Yes, this one. So I'm not going to be a bean counter, but I am going to ask. So the $25,000, is that for just the strategic planning budget alone for a whole day?
That in the preparation of the strategic plan. So not just for the day itself, but the work that goes in behind it and afterwards, that it costs to put the strategic plan together.
Okay, all right. So now I know that each jurisdiction is getting sort of not fees not going up or coming down, which is good. But when so about 2 weeks ago, there was this panic about the county not going to be committing to what they had promised before, and they had slashed the amount that they were going to contribute, and that came to my city, and that was this panic, and we got a bunch of correspondences. So now, what we are not looking at, or we're not cognizant of, if we are spending $25,000 on this strategic planning, and then we're also spending $870,000 from our reserve, it gives the impression that we have money start someplace that we could just go and pull from whenever we want to. So I like your comment on those.
No, and I appreciate that. And just for everybody's reference, the $25,000 for the strategic planning is part of the 870,000 of our reserves that we're using. And you're right, like the continued use of reserves and talking about our donations gives the impression that we have more money than we do. And we'll continue to talk about that further in the budget as well.
Just add on thing too, on the strategic plan, we've set aside the 25,000, and when we looked previously, when we did the strategic planning process, the cost was not close to 25,000. And since we are using reserves, if we don't expend more than that 25,000, that would just go back into reserves in the future.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Also something for JASCOM to consider when thinking about the budget. If you do decide to hold the recommendation of the use of reserves for this year, part of the strategic plan can be discussing what it looks like over the next few years to lessen our dependence upon reserves. and moving towards the true cost. So there is that too. If you decide to move forward with the budget that we have recommended, we can always put that as one of the discussion items for the strategic plan. So we talked about budget assumptions. This just goes a little bit more in depth when we talk about the history of reserve use. So in table A, it shows sort of what like operational funds of 2026 onward of what we're projecting the use of and slowly working our way down. So 2026, we're holding at the same as 2025 with a reduction then in 27, 28. Oh, I put 20, I have a typo in my table, I'm so sorry. And so that is the plan, but what I want to point out in both of these, so table A is what we would be using in reserves over the next few years. So totaling by 2030, technically, if my table was correct in this, it would be almost $1.3 million over the next 5 years that we would be using to offset reserves. In total, right, like adding year over year. Previous to that, if you look at table B, from 2021 during the pandemic, moving onwards, we've already utilized almost $1.9 million of reserves to offset the true cost of service. Yes.
So in table A, it shows 2026 is 385. But we say we're using 871 in reserves. What's the rest from?
We'll get to that. I have a whole table talking about it. So this graph shows what the use of no general reserves or medical reserves. So that 385 that we just talked about, that's what this graph shows, what the assessments would look like without the use of those specific reserves. So still not the true full cost of service, so to speak, but not utilizing specifically where we have actively chosen to pull more out than what we use to calculate, capital improvement projects and other things that are always a part of the budget. Now, if you want to look at all of the offsets, so if you're looking at this from the interlocal agreements point of view, so in ILA partners, it is written into the interlocal agreement that there is direct revenues that offset assessment. Those direct revenues are licensing, adoptions, and reclaim, where you get a portion of those proceeds directly back to your assessments. The other item that's written in directly into the ILA is the jurisdictions get to share all revenues coming in to joint animal services, which includes our service contracts, grants, donations, and our reserve use. That actually gets shared per capita. So if you look at what the true cost of service, so if you were a contractual partner with us, you pay the true cost of service. But if we did not have the use of reserves, or we were not directly offsetting the assessments through shared and direct revenues, this is actually what your assessments would look like for costs.
Hey, on next year's, can we put like the difference number? Or is it?
Oh, like what the actual.
Yeah, the 1.9 minus 1.06, obviously that's 940. Oh, wait, 800 and high 800s.
I will update this slide as part of just the budget hearing presentation, so it shows the difference, if that's agreeable.
Sure.
You can see in table C in the proposal to the same numbers that you're looking for, and we can make sure that it's clearly identified in presentations.
Because that's a pretty big number for the county, and percentage wise probably is for the rest of the jurisdictions, not a small number. I'm looking at nearly 50% for Olympia, same for for Lacey. And Tumwater, it looks about the same. So we're running about between 40 and 50%, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, so this was just to give a clearer view of how those shared and direct revenues directly offset the assessments of what the ILA partners pay.
And those are, like you said, put back into the system per capita.
Correct. So the direct revenue, we call it direct because adoptions, licensing and reclaims are all affected by that jurisdiction. So every time an adopter from Lacey adopts, and we know because we asked for the address, that's $15 of our adoption fee that goes back to Lacey to offset an assessment. The same thing, the entire cost of licensing goes that. The portion of the reclaim does the same thing. And so again, the more you encourage somebody to adopt, license, and come get their pet, the more it can directly offset your assessment.
And the cost of collecting those dollars, that's removed from what the per capita that's put back. So let's say, for example, processing the money is 3%, right? So $10, 3%. So then the amount that goes back is
You guys still get
970.
the full amount. We eat that cost.
JASCOM eats the cost. Oh, that's
Or could
interesting.
you argue the rest of our assessment covers it?
Yeah, no, I mean, it all, because all of it goes into paying operational stuff, but yeah, like some of those costs are just like the cost of doing business, like currently we absorb the costs for that, you know, the credit card fee for the licensing, even though it's $15, we're absorbing that fee, right?
Right, so it becomes an expense line item.
So again, this is just broken down a little differently to look at more granular as far as restricted grants and donations that gets offset. The direct revenues that you see, and the direct revenues, like I said, aren't per capita. It's, you know, per the actual adoptions, licensing, and reclaims happening in your jurisdiction, which is why it doesn't follow the percentage of a per capita for that. And then the shared revenues, which include everything that we talked about, and then that is shared per capita. So you can see broken out what each jurisdiction gets as a reduction to their assessment in red.
Okay, so the only one I don't understand is, okay, I understand adoption but how does the reclaim, how does that work? Like if somebody loses their pet and then they come and get it and we charge them a fee to get it back?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, and you guys get $15 of that reclaim fee,
Okay,
and then we collect the rest.
okay, so then they lose their pet, they put up the signs, everything like that, and they find out it's at the JASCOM shelter, they come down, hey, I want, Killer back, and, okay, well, there's a fee for getting Killer back, and that fee is,
The fee is $25 base fee and then $10 a day for kenneling.
okay. Got it.
So this is what we in 2022, we did projection of costs to let the jurisdictions know what we were projecting year over year for the next several years. As you can see, 2026, we are currently below what assessments are as we predicted, and that was following what JASCOM had outlined before, which was at this point, we were almost off the use of the reliance of reserves for the continuing one type. So no more like reduction of assessments because there was a pandemic, no more rebate because we had staffing issues with field. All of that was brought in consideration that by this point, we would be getting closer to the true cost of service.
I think something that's really important to highlight with this slide, again, this was an analysis that we did in 2022 when we took a look at if we were to remove all of the general and the medical, so just those two, not your kind of reoccurring ones, what the actual cost of service would be. And if you look at table D in the budget, the draft budget, you can see that it's fairly close to what was projected back in 2022. And I think it just highlights again, we're trying to communicate the cost of services and what that looks like over time if you were to take away those uses.
This is our statement of net position. This was as of December 31st in 2024. So it's always about a year behind. So as you can see, here we did actually have more unrestricted vet care in our reserves that has been utilized to pay for our vet services as originally planned. And so this is what our net position currently looks like, including any reserves sitting in investments as well as other assets. So revenue assumptions, we did review trends and adjusted for 2026. We increased private contributions, not to the extent that we got this year, but we are increasing year over year. And so we did project for that. An estimated slight increase in licensing, since we did see a slight decrease. I'm not estimating a huge increase this year. We might see an increase. Andrew and I are waiting. There is a company that we've been looking at to help us with our licensing. And so if everything is in place in 2026, we will be bringing to JASCOM a proposal for a different company to be handling licensing. And at that point, we might actually see a higher increase, but we are waiting for them. They currently, because they are not a Washington State company, they need to actually meet Washington State parameters when it comes to deposits and revenue and merchant services. So we're waiting for them, and hopefully in 2026, we will be relooking at them. Projections, we're continuing an increase as we have seen an increase year over year. We're not projecting an increase in reclaims due to the current trends because we've pretty much leveled off in a lot of our reclaims. So even though we're having a higher intake, we're seeing slight increases. And so anything that we project, it's just going to be very small, as well as the addition of the Mason County contract. More assumptions when it comes to expenses. So salaries and benefits continue to be the primary expense. Inflation has increased the cost of goods and consumables for shelter medicine and operations. Intake of animals has continued to increase for the last 3 years, with a 40% increase this year alone. And we've really tried to emphasize effective shelter operations, standards of care, shelter medicine efficiencies, and improved customer service. So this is restricted grants and donations. Some of these help pay for our medical that we use, along with the fee assistance program. That is the grant that we received from Best Friends. So those are continued uses. While they are grants that we use, they do sit in reserves and we have to pull them out and account for them.
For the calendar year. that they're
Correct.
assigned to.
Correct. This is what the budgeted revenue looks like broken down. So jurisdictional assessments make up 53% of our overall revenue. Shared revenues then are a portion of that, shared revenues being our beginning balance. So that is part of our reserves sitting in there. Our contracts, so with the inclusion of the Mason County contract, we have over $330,000 in contracts coming in as revenue. Donations, we're seeing, we've estimated an increase of 232 in donations, 104,000 in adoptions, 11,000 in reclaim, 140,000 in licensing, and then depreciation of the building. This is where it gets fun. Okay, so revenues, when you look at it broken down, this top line with the arrow, this is our estimating beginning cash, and that is calculated, and I'll show you guys on the next spreadsheet. This is all calculated with reserves, so minus this one, anytime else in expenses that you see this bright green, when we get to expenses, that's a cost that actually directly comes out of our reserves. So total revenues, we're calculating an increase of 8.1% in revenues across the board. So increase in donations, contracts, and some slight increases across the board when it comes to adoptions, licensing. Here's our beginning fund balance. So this is how we calculate our beginning fund balance. So when we start looking in expenses, anything that's in green for the general shelter, field, and licensing actually gets brought up to this spreadsheet to estimate what we may have to pull from our reserve balance. So we have our strategic plan, the capital no. Sorry, guys. There we go. We're back. Hit a wrong button. Capital outlays and equipment. That's all the projected stuff that we need for maintenance. Anything that goes wrong with the building, vehicles, things like that. These are more, when it's capital outlays though, these are more of our major purchases or a major fix in the building, like when we spent $25,000 on the fire replacement of the fire maintenance. So then we have in shelter operations, we have regular maintenance and replacement equipment, which sits at 2,000. Facilities maintenance, which sits at 5. Capital replacement equipment, so we're scheduled to replace our server as well as all of our computers next year on the regularly scheduled turnover of equipment. That comes out of our reserves. But one of the things that I do want, and then we have emergency maintenance too at about $10,000 for anything urgent that comes up. What I do want to point out is anything in blue is depreciation. And so part of how we're able to pull from reserves continually without that draining the way it should take place is part of your assessments is you pay your depreciation. So when we buy a new vehicle, that depreciation gets calculated and charged to the jurisdictions in a yearly fashion. So by the end of the cycle of the vehicle, we have enough money sitting in our reserves to buy that replacement vehicle. So some of this will always be using reserves for some things because it's regularly scheduled depreciation and replacement of equipment that we've budgeted into your assessment. So we'll never zero be without use because we do store those for when it comes time, just like we, charge year over year for an audit. But we do our audit every 3 years. It's so we have the money sitting there for when it's time to actually do the audit.
What is the term of a vehicle cycle? Is it 5? 5, 7, 10?
So depreciation and the actual replacement are slightly different.
That's correct.
So the depreciation, I'm not sure what accounting is using for how many years of depreciation on a vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, the city of Lacey is not replacing a vehicle until it's hit 100,000 miles. And then that's, for us, that means we're gonna go beyond, I think it's 8 years is the depreciation schedule.
Yeah, so it's because there's a brand new truck, so I was wondering like, okay.
Yeah, so none of our vehicles are close.
Yeah.
To 100,000 miles.
Just to maybe add on to that, it's typically around 5 years.
Yeah, that's what-
But what we're finding too is what we are collecting for depreciation hasn't necessarily kept on pace with the cost of vehicles.
Yeah, that's where we're.
And so that's where we have to evaluate some of our options for, where's the sweet spot for replacing it and having to pay more in reserves or extending it for additional periods of time.
Yeah, I think we are legitimately 3 or 4 years away from replacing a single vehicle.
Okay.
Unless they completely fails. Just because they are all probably, I think our oldest vehicle, I think is like 60,000 miles on it. and it's the least used vehicle. Because we use it for very specific niche thing.
So it may be depreciated out all the way, but
Yeah.
still in the fleet.
Correct.
Okay, and then, that truck, did we get that? That truck was last year? Was it? Has it been a
We-
year?
2030.
So we actually budgeted for it in 22 when the county went to full service
Mhm.
because we needed the additional vehicle with the 2 additional field officers. But because of the pandemic and the waits for some of that, we ended up not getting the vehicle until 2023, 24. I felt like we got it. So like it was like a year after that, and then we spent the year outfitting it because we also then had to wait for the kennels to come in
Right.
it to get
And
outfitted.
I think when, by the time you brought it here and presented it here, like it was.
It was like 2 years after the
2024,
fact, yeah.
So does anybody know how many miles are on it?
Maybe 15,
Okay,
maybe.
alright.
So, Sarah mentioned, with the computers that were not on a system like this, and that's something we're evaluating, moving forward of whether it makes sense to also get on a schedule with our internal services for replacements as well.
Field services has the same, we have some small tools and equipment, capital outlays, and then our capital replacement equipment and depreciation for those laptops because they have the nicer fleet laptops that they can take with them out in the field. And then this is where our restricted grants are. And again, some of this is just because that's how we have to account for it in our system, grant cycles, things like that. So again, this, our restricted donations, we might always use some of this because this is how we track it through any types of grants. So if we get another adoption event grant, if we get a grant that helps pay for medical, it would fall into that category. So again, saying a complete not use of reserves is probably not realistic, but the idea is that monies are actually there and are being replaced and or accounted for for specific items, right? And so then you can see here where the recommended use of reserves to offset the true cost of service for the 135, and then the $250,000 here. So shared revenues, restricted grants, and so that's what calculates our total beginning fund balance, which goes into our revenues. I know it's a lot of spreadsheets, guys, sorry. So the pie chart for what budgeted expenditures look like. Shelter operations continues to be the largest portion of our budget expenditures, followed by field services, then general services rounding that out. General services is where a lot of our administrative costs go into. So any of our professional consultants, the fee that JASCOM pays to the city of Lacey for administrative services, all of those fees are what goes into general services.
So shelter operation, as we look forward to, potentially, new facilities, how do you see that number changing? If and when we are able to build something and get something completed.
I mean, I do project that if we continue to see these increased intakes as well as like the new building, I do project that we will see slowly an increase of staff. But I'll know once we get closer to see if like intakes level off. This is such just a funky time to be making those assessments. Cause yeah, if we continue to have 40% intake increases year over year, like that's a lot of animals coming in, right? This could also be an off year and we see things dip down a little bit, or we could see just a slight increase. So it was easier to predict that 2020, 2021, and 2022 because we were pretty static on all of our intakes. And so it was much easier to say, yes, like we would hold at this specific number. And then when we saw that little jump in 2023, we're like, okay, this makes sense. But then the last in 2024 and this year to just have such large increases to our intake, it really has thrown off a lot of the calculations of what I would say we would need in the future.
So these numbers are more about the amount of animals we're taking care of than the actual facility that the animals are at, or the facilities that we run, you would say?
It's kind of a little bit of a mixture. The biggest portion of the 2,000 is the people cost, right? And so if you have.
2 million, not 2,000.
2 million, sorry. And so if the increase, like Sarah says, continues to be so large, we will have to at some point go
Add more people.
which would then significantly impact that 2 million. A new building is probably going to increase this in some areas, so like utilities and things like that, because it's gonna be a much larger building. Maybe it's more energy efficient, and so there's something there.
Maybe the taxes are a little.
Correct. And then there's gonna be some things that will dip, like repairs and maintenance, because it's a new building, right? So, but I think those are gonna be negligible. I think those aren't gonna impact the overall number as much as how many animals we are seeing and how many people we need to take care of those animals.
Right.
And so we might see this grow and may have to see this grow over the next couple of years, just because the numbers keep going up and we need the people now versus when a new building.
So it's mainly gonna be about how much staff we're gonna need.
Correct.
And I will say, not to be the Debbie Downer in this situation, right? But like, those are discussions that we have to have, because if the jurisdictions don't want an increased cost to their assessment as we're building, getting to the true cost of service, but we still see an influx of animals, then that's where tougher decisions need to be made. So JASCOM has always been really wanting to have as many positive outcomes as possible. But when we don't have staffing to meet standards of care, we are not going to warehouse animals or keep more animals than necessary, which means our euthanasia numbers would go up to accommodate that if we don't have staffing to help keep up.
Okay.
So there's always cause and effect, right?
Yeah.
So we may need to increase costs, but if JASCOM as a whole says, hey, we really can't afford that, we can't afford it in our assessments, then that means there needs to be an effect to balance that. And so if we don't have staffing to accommodate these continual increase in intakes, then it has to give somewhere. And usually that means quicker and more euthanasia decisions.
Got it. Peter?
Thank you. So, our jurisdictional cost allocation, what is that based on?
What's what based on?
Our jurisdictional cost allocation. So, for example, for stormwater, how do we determine how much stormwater is assessed? Is it based upon population or based upon the number of intakes?
No, it's based on population. It's a per capita assessment. It's based on what OFM estimated
Gotcha.
population was for 2025.
Gotcha. So then, it,
I lost this connection. You still there, Peter?
so sorry about that. I don't know why. So do you then do a 5-year increase based upon OFM data?
Increase it every year. We take a look at OFM's estimates.
Yeah, it's based on the OFM estimate for the current year to project what the estimates are going to be in 2026. So I use 2025 OFM population data
Okay,
to determine what your 2026 assessment looks like.
gotcha. Thank you.
So this is general services. So we do have some salaries that sit here. The big one that, I want to point out again, so this green line, professional services other, this would be where the strategic planning session, was accounted for. And it is a green line, so it is used from reserves. It is cut by about 50% this year. We did not use anything in the professional services this year, so we cut it. But as you can see, like, there's really not huge changes here. It's really about a 5, almost 6% just increase in cost in general services. Some of it was a slight increase to the City of Lacey's administrative costs. Some of it was our IT expenses, insurance and liability, AWC pool, which went up slightly. So just smaller increases for the general services. So expenses shelter, we did see just a slight decrease in staff when we calculated both benefits and the salaries this year with finance. The major things to look at is an increase in all of our veterinary supplies. So we're seeing a large increase both in vaccine, spay neuter, euthanasia supplies, microchips. But professional vet services would be our cost to pay for relief vets to come in to help either when our veterinarian is on vacation or, for example, when we had to take on additional surgery days this summer. So all of those, we see an increase in cost. However, overall, shelter operations does not have a huge increase. We only did about a 3% increase overall in shelter operations. So really not bad when we tightened everything up. There was some shifting around of where we saw we weren't expending some of those categories so that we could shift it into some of the much needed line items that we are expending.
And this is post, full, I guess, there's no vacant positions, right? I mean, like.
Correct. This is,
After we're all filled out.
yep, this is fully staffed. Full services, field services is going to see an increase. Pointing out that we're gonna see a 21% increase in salaries, and that is that additional Mason County Animal Control Officer. So this is accounting for that 2-year term limited team member. It is accounting for the additional benefits with that.
I'll just jump in really quickly to Sarah. So this body hasn't approved that agreement, but we're
Correct.
planning for it, and we're planning to bring it back in front of this body for future discussion.
And if I remember right, the conversation at that time was the contractual agreement with them was going to cover.
It covers an animal control officer, and it covers up to 125 animals being sheltered at our facility.
Gotcha. So even though we're seeing this increase, right, because of that, taking on that jurisdiction, we're also on contracts, we're gonna see the dollar amount coming in that's going to not only cover that, but actually provide a little bit of revenue.
Correct. And that's why there's also a specific limit, knowing that we have seen an increase. We don't want to exceed our capacity, and we don't really, Mason County is an unknown factor because they don't have an animal shelter there, so they don't know how many animals they have. We also are doing limited field services with them, so we're not doing our full gamut of calls that we would do for the ILA partners. There's very specific calls, and they're basically all facing to keep people safe. So it's like their dangerous dogs, bites. We're helping with their cruelty and neglect cases. And the max is to make sure that neither one of us, so neither Mason County wants to pay for extra animals outside of that, and we don't want that increase either. And so it's very specifically contractually in there so that there's a discussion. Because Mason County, we helped them in the last couple of years through some mutual aid with advice. And so, for example, those 60 dogs that came in 2024, that was a cruelty case that we helped them with. We took 13 of those, right? And
Yeah.
so like, it would be more of a conversation of, hey, yes, we're gonna help you with this case, and we have the subject matter experts to help you with this case. We are not taking all of these animals, but we'll help facilitate rescues to help take some of these animals as well.
And that's a 24-month.
Yes, the way we wrote it, it's a 2-year long contract. That way it coincides with a 2-year term limited employee.
Yeah, of course. I mean, of course, you want to date for a couple of years, see how it goes.
There's an option to renew that up to 3 times.
Yeah, smart.
It's also limited days and hours. So
Yes.
they, yeah, they don't get 7 days, they don't get emergency response, none of that. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's Tuesday through Saturday during operational hours.
Yeah, we can go out Tuesday through Saturday.
8 to 5, Tuesday
Yeah.
to Saturday.
He's doing his best to break my business facade over here.
Is it working?
History.
So field services does see a significant increase overall of about 22%. The other thing that I want to highlight, and it's in pink here, is because we have seen an increase in cruelty cases and forensic examinations are not inexpensive, we have decided to better track those costs by actually having a medical line in field. Now it says no, I still need my line item designated from finance, but we wanted it to be budgeted here to account for when we pay for forensic exams, when we have to have an avian specialist come on site for a cockfighting case. Like that's what this money is specifically going to help cover and make it so that we can actually track that year over year now, instead of it just coming out of our shelter medical, which is where it had been coming from originally.
So why is that 35,000 not carried over into the, to reflect a change?
Ow, I don't, sorry. I don't know why it didn't reflect the increase of 35,000 here.
So that
Why did it
22%
change?
is maybe a little bit low. If that 173 is not accurate.
Correct, if that's not calculating. Thank you for that. So it might be higher. Good catch.
I can't do fast enough math to gauge if the 173 is right.
You sit on the finance committee, don't you?
I do, but they give us the numbers.
I think you are correct that it is not correct.
Yeah.
That updated.
Okay.
Yeah, we can update this, and we can send, of course, we'll have an updated packet, but I appreciate you pointing that out because I missed that it was not carried over into the change. I'm making my note. These are smaller line items, so really licensing is just one line item. Right now, it's for printing and binding. It's for us to send out reminders for everybody to renew their license. That's our cost. As well as when we have to purchase more licenses. So that's where that cost comes from. And then this is just the line items, again, going over our restricted donations. So costs for vaccine and medical, professional services, vet services, spay neuter, public education, the assistance program, and we do have a very mini program, licensing assistance program for people who are on a fixed income. So we will provide a free license to those that qualify. Expense and shelter debt. Our shelter debt and depreciation of the building actually decreased by $1. So we went from 56,130 to 56,129. So then this brings us to the assessments. So Thurston County sits at 51% of the total assessment, with Olympia at 19, Lacey at 21, and Tumwater at 9. And this is a 2% decrease over last year's assessment. I'll have a different breakdown for you here on the next slide. So you can see here, with the red box, you can see the difference in amount, compared to 2025 budget. That's this peachy colored box with the red. Going to the next one, you can see compared to the use of no general reserves, so that 135, and then the reduction in vet services that was technically supposed to happen to 200,000. So this is what the assessments would have looked like comparatively if we had done that. And then if we move to no general reserves and no medical reserves, this is what the cost of assessments would look like, and the dollar increase to that. And this is again, just compared with 2026 budget. That does not mean that these would be the numbers because of course, inflation, intake, all of that, you know, can affect these numbers year over year, but this is to give you a general estimation of what those costs would be. And then just pointing out once more, our less restricted donations. So our restricted grants, our revenues, our shared revenues that help reduce the overall assessment. And so the 2026 recommended budget that staff is recommending is $3,941,922. That is an increase of $336,975 or a 9% overall budget increase. And for final considerations, I
Wait.
want, yes,
So can you go back one slide?
I sure can.
So of this $3,941,000, 870 of that is reserves. And okay, trying to do the math in my head.
It's still
just not-
technically though, so here's what you wanna think about. That is still the $3,941,000 is still our true cost of service because that is what our expenses cost.
And the reserve portion of that would be what? I don't know, what percentage is that, Shannon?
We said it was
Was it
22.4%
22.4%.
or 23, as I said.
So the revenues match the expenses. So the revenues are exactly so that we have a balance of zero. So technically the same amount of revenue is coming in and 870,000 of our revenue coming in is beginning fund balance used from our reserves.
So if my elected colleagues are willing, I would love to hear from each of them. I'm still having trouble with, forgive me for saying this, I'm having trouble with the decrease. Only because, like, yes, we are all in tough budget times, but I have to assume that when our city calculated our budget, they were calculating an increase. Right, so the assumption was everything's going up 3%, 5%, whatever number they used. So even coming in at a flat dollar amount would be a reduction from what I'm assuming we are budgeting. Now, I've not had that conversation with my city manager, so I don't know that, but I would be curious if the other cities were already counting on this decrease.
I don't think we were counting on a decrease from last year's numbers. Like you guys, I think we were counting on an increase. I just don't, I briefing on it last year, most likely said that the next year's assessment was going to be a little bit more because we were trying to get off of reserves. But I don't remember how much more I might have said at that time. And I probably didn't give a number, maybe more of a percentage. But I do, like we talked about earlier tonight, like want to see, you know, what it would be if we did kind of reduce the output of reserves and actually started trying to get a little bit closer to the actual cost.
So just for this body's awareness too, just doing some quick math here. So you can see on one of the slides back there, that the decrease effectively was around $20,000, that amount to that 2% overall. And so to kind of have I guess, on par to what last year's assessment would be, you could reduce one of your reserves use by around $20,000, and that would give all of the jurisdictions about the same assessment as they had previously.
So it is, if you see here, the difference, it's
$40,000.
Yeah, so it is a small amount. And again, it is, JAS staff is, will follow the direction of the commission of what they would like to see. So we're more than happy to calculate what it would look like to stay the same. But again, it's, you see here for Olympia, for example, it would be an additional $8,000.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and the reason why I bring it up time and time again is because, it seems like we're all out, like, because of the dollars that you bring in, right? We all get a break, we all get a discount, okay? Yay, that's fantastic, okay? But we can't, we can't continue hoping that Sarah brings in enough money to make our assessments less, right? It's just not, it's not, for the lack of a better word, sustainable. I know we overuse that word, but it's not something that we can always count on. Sarah's gonna bring in this money and we're all gonna get a break. Right? Well, the extra dollars that you bring in really do need to go towards stuff that we need, future items that may break down, costs that we may have to assume that we can't foresee right now. That's what reserves are designed to be. They're not really designed to, pay down a credit card, so to speak. So that's why I keep saying, let's take a look and see what we can do to, I don't want to charge the city of Lacey more money. I don't want to charge the county more money. I don't want to charge Tumwater more money, for sure not Tumwater, right? But at the same time, we all gotta look at our bill and say, I really need to pay my bill. That's just the way it is. So if, we're not voting on this, you're not looking for any action, but we do need to take a look at what it would cost if we, raise the temperature just a little bit, scientifically, you can call it boiling frogs if you want to, but 1 degree at a time until we get to where we need to be. And we're not relying on reserves to balance us out so that we can, actually, because we're gonna need money coming up in the near future, right? We've got a capital outlay, we've got some things we wanna do. And at the same time, we're burning through our reserves annually to appease jurisdictions, right? So we're gonna need these dollars. JASCOM's gonna need this money, as opposed to saying, hey, here's a discount for you, here's a discount for you, year over year. Like, I don't even wanna take a minute to add up all the discounts, right? Because it would probably be a really frustrating number to look at. But I think a lot of us agree that we're gonna have to, the jurisdictions are gonna have to pay the piper. And I know that we went through some things with the county over this last couple of weeks, and, we were able to iron that out with them. Which is probably the reason why we have looked at it and said, we're not even gonna mention anything over 1.062, whatever that number was. Right? Just gonna leave it alone. Okay, we won that battle. Yay. Right? But we still have to get back on track.
Well, and you hit on my point exactly that. Great, let's not go over the 1.062, whatever, but why decrease?
Yeah. And I think in that budget hearing that they had, we need to be at least at that.
So we can bring back open, looks like we have
Commissioner we got Commissioner
Oh.
Klaus.
Spurred some conversation. Here we go. Commissioner Klaus was first.
Thank you. I just want to say I appreciate the presentation, and I'm kind of with Councilmember Green as far as reducing the assessments for next year. I think it's an honorable proposal for staff to make. And I know that the jurisdictions probably really appreciate it. I know I do. You're always trying to find creative ways to lessen the burden on jurisdictions and still sustain operations. But given the last couple of weeks and how I don't know what the right word would be, contentious they've been, I considered it a win that we were able to rescind the motion to cut the budget. And as far as I'm aware right now, we do have the budget for next year set at what the projected budget would have been. So that's the 1.081 number. And so I think it makes sense to not reduce assessments. But of course I can, I'll take this back to the commission. But that's just kind of my 2 cents right now. Off the top of my head is it makes sense to me to leave it the way that it already is, because after the last several weeks, we kind of landed on keeping it where it is. And so I think that if the county's willing to do that, then yeah, I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at with it right now.
I will just, in response to Commissioner Klaus's statement, I do want to let commissioners know, and you should already be aware, most of you were CC'd on an email to your city manager or county commissioner with that estimated cost. So just as part of a speaking point that yes, if you are taking this back to your jurisdictions to have that discussion, just keep in mind that an estimation was already sent out
Okay.
to the jurisdictions.
I was surprised that went before this meeting.
I hear you. It's a fine balance of making sure staff have a heads up so they know what to expect. On top of keeping it in line timing wise with presenting to you guys.
And I think too, like we've heard some of the comments here tonight, and we can certainly take a look at what a reduction in reserves would look like to make it more in line with last year, and bring both of these again for discussion at the next JASCOM meeting after you've had opportunities to check into with your various jurisdictions.
Let's see what Peter has to say. Peter?
Yeah, I am. So I thought when the letter that went to my city manager was based upon what the assessment would have been. Was it based upon what the reduction is? Because I don't remember what the data is.
I communicated in the emails what the assessment was and what the percentage decrease.
And that was a reduction, right?
Yes, and that was, for Tumwater, it was communicated it was a 2% reduction.
Okay, so now, because we've done that now, it is not going to look good if we go back now and say, well, oh, wait, no, this is what it would be if we haven't done that. So I think, in my own opinion, the way we could remedy that is to communicate with them that we did this because we knew that forces were tight and we were hoping to reduce burdens all across the board. But the 2026 budget would be a little bit more than we had anticipated, and this is what it would be. And let's just leave it at that. Does that make sense?
So leave it at the reduced amount?
Well, because if I already received communication from you that you're going to reduce the burden, and then you come back and say, well, wait a minute, I don't know if you want to do that. It doesn't make us look kind of good and professional. So I think since we've already said that and let them know, we should stick with that. And then going forward, make it right by exactly saying, okay, without the reduction, this is what it is. So at least if we in the future say to them, this is what your assessment is because we gave you this last year, but if we didn't give you this, what it would be, at least they would know that we bent over backward to reduce the assessment for that, for Is that, am
So,
I making sense?
so to the county, we sent out 1.08. Is that right? 1.08,
1061.
1061. But
It would be a $20,000 increase to them if,
But it sounded like Commissioner Klaus said that the county had agreed on 1.08. And that's where that's their comfort zone. That's what they're, right? That's what they're prepared to do.
right. I would also, in this instance for communications, if JASCOM is looking at going back to level, you know, the email that I sent out is for your awareness and its estimations. Last year, we ended up having an increase after that estimation that we sent out. You know, part of the appointments for you guys is to go back to your jurisdictions and say, hey, as a governing body, we talked about this and this is what we as a body have decided to do. And once I have firmer direction from you guys, or if you would like, as part of the direction tonight, I can initiate that email back with each one of you appointed members in the email saying that JASCOM has discussed what the numbers would look like to keep the rates as 2025.
And that's where I think, you know, building off what Sarah's saying is, no decisions are made tonight. This is a preliminary draft overview of the budget with the intention, like Sarah was saying, that, you know, each person goes back to their jurisdiction and talks about that budget. And we're gonna have another discussion on it, and we can certainly, again, you know, bring forward updated materials that show both of these. So as you're deliberating with your jurisdictions, you can bring back more information for further discussion at the next JASCOM meeting.
So 2% of 4 million. That's 80 grand,
No, it's the 2% is only 43.
43.
So if we went back to what last year's assessment would be, it would be just a little over 20 grand for Thurston County, a little over 8 grand for Olympia. It would be not quite 11 grand for Lacey, and then just a little over $4,000 for Tumwater if we went back to last year's assessment and did not have a reduction, but stayed static in our assessments.
That would take reserve use from 22% of the budget to about 21%.
21.7?
I mean, I think, you know, again, it would go back to what was proposed last year, and if I had the budget from last year, we did have a reduction in those general reserves. We did have a reduction in those veterinary services. We weren't down to zero in either of those. And we had the idea that we would continue to reduce those over time. And what we did this year, as a proposed budget, was just to continue what we had in place. But that's certainly something we can go back to what we had proposed, you know, last year. Also compare it to the 43,000 and have those options available to have further discussion on.
Okay, so I appreciate what you've done, and I'll get to both of those guys. I appreciate what you've done. And you said, hey, you know what? Yes, our costs are going up. We're not gonna charge you any extra. Okay, that's nice. However, I think, like was spoken earlier, like, let us take this back to our council, because if you, anytime you go back to somebody and say, look, they're willing to pay, you know, a portion, or they're willing to burn through some of their reserves for us, right? Should we let them do that? Right? Of course, they're gonna be like, yeah, let them burn through, right? That's it, but, well, maybe not everybody, you know, but I just honestly have a feeling that, you know, if each of us goes back to our councils and says, you know, JASCOM's willing to burn through some of their reserves so that we don't have, you know, to take a hit financially. I'm not sure, I'm not sure how, I don't think my council would be, you know, hurt if they have to pay another $11,000 in assessment. I honestly don't. And I think they would understand because the viability, long-term viability of JASCOM is more important because of the services that are provided. right? And so I do think we all each need to go back and talk to our councils. And at normally what happens is this is just a report out. This is not always, I don't think this has ever been an individual agenda item, right? For discussion. It's just like report out, tell us what happened. Great, thank you. Right. But in this case, I feel like, since we are, trying to wrap up this budget and we have a work session tomorrow night, and I probably won't be able to get this on the agenda for tomorrow night, but I definitely feel like I want to have that, just a quick conversation about, JASCOM's burning through $11,000 of their reserves so that we don't have to pay it. And I think the rest of this, each one of these officials probably needs to do a similar thing so that we can come back and tell you, what our councils feel like is the best thing. I don't want to just say, oh yeah, let's just burn through these JASCOM reserves like they're no big deal, like we have been doing year over year, right? Because there's just too much on the horizon to be letting go of reserves so that jurisdictions don't have to pay them, even though, we understand that jurisdictions are having some budget issues right now. No one's exempt. So that's my personal feeling. Commissioner Klaus.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to just say, well, first I looked through my phone just really briefly while we were in this meeting, and I didn't see an email about the estimated amount being 1.06. But I am looking on my phone, so I might have it, but just can't find it right now. Do you know what date that was sent out?
It was sent out on Friday. Commissioner Klaus, it could be very likely that I did not CC you on
Okay.
that email as an accident.
Oh, okay, no problem. That's okay. I was just wondering about the date because I wanted to let the commission know that our preliminary general fund budget was actually approved last Tuesday. So that was approved with the 1.08 amount. It is just the preliminary general fund budget, so nothing is set in stone until December when we take the final vote. But just so that this commission is aware, that's where the county is at. We've already approved the 1.08. When it comes to reporting back to the board, of course, I will report back on how this conversation went, but everything we're talking about now, it does align with previous conversations we've had throughout the year about reducing our reliance on the reserves. And those are conversations we've been having throughout the year. So I don't think it would surprise the county for me to come in and say, we're staying static, or, like the commission is recommending that the assessments remain static so that we aren't continuing to dip into reserves at the same rate. So I think that, yeah, the conversation is, it's easy enough to have. We've had a lot of rough conversations, but I think this one makes sense. But I just wanted to let JASCOM know that our preliminary general fund budget was approved last Tuesday.
Councilmember Gabe.
Thank you. So, because our communication went out, us going to go have a word with our full council, it's just kicking the can down the road. So my suggestion is, let Sarah or whomever draft a letter to state, here's the situation, here's what we're gonna do, and here's how much your assessment is. So that way, we can still go back and see have discussion with them, but that is not going to preclude us from saying that this is our decision.
Thank you. So if we have you draft a letter and say, hey, here's our numbers that we need to hit without, that are consistent with last year, right? And I know it's only gonna save 40 grand. Okay, I get that part, right? There's still another 830 out there that we are gonna use. I'm really hoping next year works out in terms of maybe we can have some tax dollars. If some legislation works out, maybe the design work will come through and we'll have a clearer picture of, what our future costs are gonna be. I just kind of want to start saving for that now, if at all possible, is what I'm really trying to get at.
Sure, so I'm understanding that possible direction from JASCOM from this meeting is just to let jurisdictional staff know that JASCOM discussed what it potentially would look like if assessment stayed static.
Correct. Please, and thank you.
All right, and the last slide is to talk about the events that did take place a couple of weeks ago. So as a reminder, the Board of County Commissioners initially made a motion to engage the county manager to see what it would look like to reduce their overall assessment to $500,000. That Friday, they rescinded that motion to reinstate the full assessment fee. So some considerations for JASCOM moving forward. If a reduction does need to be made, it is clearly outlined in our ILA that field services is the first one that is reduced. Keep in mind, with a reduction down to paying $500,000, staff did initially look at what that may look like. And it would have severe impacts to, especially the services provided to potentially a jurisdiction, depending on what that looks like. So in this case, over $500,000 reduction would greatly impact, if not completely reduce field services to zero in the county, because that's the first recommended of where that comes. And potentially at that amount would impact sheltering services as well. And so some considerations for JASCOM to think about is if an impact like that were to take place, it doesn't just affect Thurston County residents. It does impact services as a whole to all the jurisdictional partners within the ILA, because it is services based on economy of scale. And so if we have to reduce to no field services within the county, that does affect the staffing that we have, which would affect overall services. So just keeping some of those considerations in mind. Some of the benefits currently to being an ILA partner is that shared economy of scale. You do get those benefits of a reduced assessment, regardless of debating about the reserves. There still are revenues and shared revenues that ILA partners get to take advantage of to help reduce their assessments, versus when you're a contracted partner. A contracted partner, we usually charge true cost of service to those jurisdictional partners. And so those are all items that, JASCOM in the future should keep in mind, should an ILA partner not be able to meet the needs of, or the agreement of the ILA, what that looks like for that partner in the future. And that can be any partner.
Yeah. With the county being 51%, $600,000 drop is more than half. So they'd be down to 23%, from that ballpark. It's pretty significant.
So just some items to consider.
Yep.
We want to make sure that, the ILA partners are committed to the agreement and the services that Joint Animal Services provides.
Yeah. And if it comes out in a letter and, you set that expectation, so that there's no, I think that would help, a little bit. And we can save 40 grand. Yeah,
Budget presentation.
okay, and next on our agenda is the director's report.
All right, thankfully this one will be short. I know it's been a long meeting.
Sure it will.
Although I will say, we're still doing better than last year, because last year we didn't get out till 8:30, so we're still doing good. So we did have in August another fee waived event sponsored by Best Friends. So we had 67 animals adopted, 51 cats, and 16 dogs, and we're looking at holding an adoption event for basically the last 2 weeks of October. And I think we're toying with $31 adoption fees.
Adoption fees for the cats. For Halloween special.
Mm-hmm. So stay tuned for more information. So we had a state conference a couple weeks ago, Leading the Pack, hosted by the Washington Federation of Animal Care and Control Agencies. Jazz was well represented both on the committee planning the conference as well as presenters and attendees. I wanted to highlight Becca, our positive outcomes coordinator, did her first conference presentation. She sat on a panel about social media. So taking different size organizations, she sat on a panel with Best Friends Animal Society, Pasado Safe Haven, and Humane Society for Tacoma and Pierce County. And they talked about really down to earth, easily attainable social media strategies. And so the feedback that we heard from everybody is it was really nice, very easy things to accomplish. A lot of times at these conference presentations, you get very large organizations like San Diego Humane Society or Seattle Humane, or Casey Pet Project, where they have, multi-million-dollar budgets, $10+ million, where they have an actual social media communications department and a person dedicated. So they'll tell you all these great strategies that, yeah, you have a full-time person that's dedicated to doing this. And so they really talked very feasible strategies for anybody to do. Talked about the algorithms, and it was really great. They showed examples of their own social media and their own strategies that work for them. And Becca's focus was basically like, hey, we don't have a dedicated person at all. It's me, and we've made sure that, every one of our work phones has social media so that our animal control officers can capture photos and videos at any time, and we can post in real time, and it doesn't have to be one single person, and that we have the best subjects, right? Like, who doesn't love cute furry animals? And so really the content writes itself. And so that was her first conference presentation. We're very proud of her. We also, like I talked about in our budget presentation, Joint Animal Services, we completed our Care Ready Bronze certified organization. So 100% of our staff went through the Ready certification. And it's very exciting. We're one of 3 organizations that has hit that status this year. And so how Ready makes us better? Ready program provides comprehensive framework that enhances life-saving work and promotes animal well-being through an equity lens. So it really focuses on our community and the demographics of our community and meeting people where they are at, and making sure that we don't have our own implicit biases affecting our decision-making or interactions with our community. We also fully launched our dog enrichment program. So we're very excited. We had our orientation and we had a total of 24 volunteers sign up and get oriented. And now there are time slots where volunteers can come and set up behavior enrichment for the dogs. Anything from frozen peanut butter Kongs to making scent puzzles so the dogs or cats have something to sniff that's different for the mental stimulation. We even have playlists, we have videos,
Yeah,
there's like
every
kitty
day of the week is, yeah,
videos.
like different music genres, which
Mm.
is dependent on your style, right? I don't love reggae days, but there's a reggae day.
That's my favorite day. I'm not a
It's
huge
great.
country music fan, so, you know, it, but it makes it fun, stimulating. The kitties also get some kitty TV, even our cat treatment with the kittens, they have literally an iPad playing like literal kitty TV where like butterflies and birds are flitting about and making noises. So all of this is to reduce the stress of kennel life that everything brings. And this was created by Becca, really. She did the whole manual, that created this program. And so it's one more step that we can do to kind of alleviate the stress that causes the animals by being in the shelter.
And I would like to add, specifically, this program was really helpful with a recent cruelty case we had where we seized over 20 animals. And the owners did postpone a petition, so these animals were in our care for over 30 days. That's incredibly stressful on these animals. And it also limits who can handle these animals as well. As of right now, only staff and our cruelty volunteers are allowed to handle these animals under court custody. And so, but what we saw is dogs came to expect their daily enrichment, and that really helped keep them sane. I think, and helped, get them to the point where they weren't so deteriorated by the end of that hold that they are still suitable to be rehabilitated, sent out for rescue, adopted, all of the wonderful things. So this is a really important program, and I am really proud of Becca and all the work that she's put into it.
We had our second cohort of our animal cruelty response team oriented and trained. I'll let Sierra speak to that. 'Cause
Yeah.
It's your program. I don't want to speak to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was on September 27th, I believe.
Let's just say September.
Yeah.
It was in September.
Yeah, so we did the second recruitment this year for our animal cruelty response volunteer program. I believe, so we also opened it up to local law enforcement agencies as well. So we had representation from the Nisqually Indian tribe. And I believe we also sent a few of our shelter staff members as well, because we want our shelter staff to have the same exposure to training as, of course, our volunteers. I believe that we added 7 new volunteers to this program, and which brings us to a total of, I think, over 20 approved cruelty volunteers. And then this summer we actually, I believe we discussed it maybe at a previous JASCOM meeting, but we did get to actually put them into action this summer as well, which is really exciting. But everybody said it was a really great program, and they're excited for the work that they get to do. Yeah.
Community events and education. So we had quite a busy couple of months. We were at Animal Allies Club with Timberland Library. Capital Collision did a fundraiser for us, hot rods and hot dogs. And they raised over $3,000 for Joint Animal Services. We had City of Yelm Puppapalooza. It was a adoptable animal promoting outreach. It was to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of their dog park, I believe, opening. We had Thurston County Preparedness Expo for emergency preparedness, where we talked about emergencies with pets. Nisqually Housing Fair, another Animal Allies Club 1-year anniversary on October 1st. So we've been doing that for 1 year. And then we also had our annual Pups in the Patch at Rutledge Farm, hosted by Olympia Subaru. And I'm very excited to talk about this happy tale. So this is Littlefoot. Littlefoot was actually found abandoned in one of the Lacey parks. He had a body score of 1, which is the worst body score condition you can have. He also had sores consistent with prolonged confinement. We did a social media post about Littlefoot, hoping to get more leads about who might know more information about where this pup was kept or found, or if anybody knew anything, but we unfortunately did not really get a whole lot of leads. But our veterinary and foster teams were developed a great program, and literally within a few weeks, he put on 11 pounds. Our vet assistant was the one who fostered him to make sure he was getting the care that he needs. And he actually stole the heart through social media. The executive director for Whatcom Humane Society, Laura, saw Littlefoot and just fell in love and came down to meet him once he got approved by our veterinarian to travel. And so now Littlefoot, who his name is now Leon, I just found out today, this was after I had put all this together. So Leon has a very overweight corgi brother and a couple of kitty siblings as well. And Laura says that he has a better wardrobe than she does right now. She went out and bought him a whole new fall wardrobe, lots of hoodies to keep him warm while he's putting on weight. But he's going to spend out the rest of his days running around on 10 acres. Laura had a pit bull for about 15 years. His name was Zane, who showed up to Whatcom Humane in the same condition. So she has lots of experience with that as well. And she had just lost Zane this year, and Littlefoot just kind of hit that chord for her that it reminded her of Zane, and we knew she would be a great fit. You know, he has a few I wouldn't say behavior issues, but you know, he was not potty trained. He was not neutered, so a lot of behaviors that come with being fully intact. So I think with just the little extra that he needs, I think Laura's a really good fit because she knows the amount of work that's going to go into him to be rehabilitated. So.
Can you move so we can see the upper?
Oh, yes, because you have to see him in his rain jacket with a hood. So, and then that's him in his hoodie, because he was cold.
What a difference in those two pictures.
You know, like where you don't see the indent, I'm gonna go
Right.
back real quick, just where, especially, yes, in the ribs, but since he's covered, like the real difference you see is in the face structure in these, where he's really starting to fill in. So his legs were also fully wrapped from sores and stuff that were bandages that had to be changed out daily as well. So that's my happy tale. Littlefoot, now Leon, is gonna live his best life up in Bellingham.
Okay, well, we've reached the end of our agenda, and our next meeting is
November. Thank you.
10th.
It's the
Okay.
day before Veterans Day.
Okay, and at that one, you are gonna be wanting some action on the budget? Or are we
It is a-
waiting till December for that?
It's our budget hearing, but it would be nice to have direction from JASCOM at the November meeting in case I need to make any budget changes for JASCOM to vote for in the December meeting.
Okay, so voting in December, everybody talks to their council between now and the November meeting. And then did you want to just, maybe we can put on next month's agenda, the bill that you've been talking to Representative Partially about,
Oh, yeah.
and we can have that on next month's agenda and brief this group on that. Okay,
For anybody who wants to know and does their homework ahead of time, that's House Bill 1985.
short read.
Animal
For
Control
now.
District Bill. But I will also put it on the agenda to discuss.
Yeah, and so I've talked a little bit about it. And you know, I think we were talking about maybe 12 cents. Or
I had not gotten in detail with numbers, Malcolm.
Okay. But of course, with, you know, some type of a 10-year sunset on that, which would be really good towards capital.
Yeah, we're working with some partners to kind of understand maybe what is a good direction to move forward with that. And so we will hopefully have some more information for you at the next
Yeah.
meeting. So I think right now, we're gonna do a little stakeholdering and get some feedback.
Yeah, and if we have to push that to December, that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's time that we start having that conversation. So we can know that what we're looking at, and then we can couple that with, you know, the potentially design work and the dollars that came through for the design work. And that could be our maybe our end of the year conversation. Something along those lines.
Yes. the bare minimum, I will give you an update about House Bill 1985 as I'm working with Lisa to do stakeholder.
So it sounds like you're already on this, but I know this is the time of year where a lot of folks are working on their shared legislative agendas. So if this is something that ideally all of our ILA partners would have as part of their shared legislative agenda, I would just encourage that conversation to happen early, because I assume that's being built right now.
And we actually met last week for the Thurston County Shared Legislative Agenda, and we
Perfect.
socialized this, and we'll continue to send information out.
Done.
Okay, so we have reached the end of our agenda, and so without objection, I will call.
One quick question. Isn't November our last meeting of the year?
No, December is our last meeting of the year. Historically, we do the budget presentation in October. We have the budget hearing in November, and then we vote on the budget in December.
Okay, because I'm going off our every other month. Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha. We're done.
All right, any more questions or comments from the group?
I just want to emphasize that if any appointed budgetary jurisdictional partners cannot make any of the last two meetings, to make sure that your alternate can make in your stead, because we need to have all representation for discussion and vote.